Just imagine something with me for a quick second here.
Okay, lay it on me.
Picture yourself standing over a really simple, just completely ordinary bucket of water. Like maybe it's sitting on a dusty, sun-baked street corner somewhere.
Right, just a totally mundane, everyday scene.
Exactly. And the water is, it's a little murky, it's a little agitated from like the vibrations of the road, maybe some carts going by.
Just catching all that ambient movement, yeah.
Yeah. And you look down into it and you are expecting to see exactly what you'd normally see, right? Like a really dull, kind of distorted reflection of the sky, or maybe it's the silhouette of your own head.
Sure, just your basic puddle reflection.
But instead, as you stare into those tiny little ripples, it's like the water just completely falls away.
Oh, wow. Like an optical illusion.
Better than that, you find yourself looking at the entire infinite blueprint of the universe.
Okay, that's a massive shift in scale.
Right. You are suddenly watching these swirling galaxies and, exploding suns, the slow birth and violent death of entire worlds. And it's all just contained right there within the tiny, fragile boundary of that everyday, dirty little object.
I mean, that just forces a complete collapse of how we measure reality, doesn't it?
It totally shatters it.
Because to hold that specific image in your mind, it just destroys our standard human sense of scale. I mean, we are so heavily conditioned to believe that profound cosmic truths are always hidden away.
Yeah, like they're locked in some distant, unreachable dimension or something.
Exactly. Or, locked behind decades of intense ascetic meditation on a mountaintop.
Right, like you have to earn it through suffering or extreme isolation.
Yeah, but the image you're describing, it suggests something totally different. It suggests that the infinite is actually reflecting right back at us in the dirtiest, most mundane aspects of our daily lives.
And that mind-expanding shift, that exact collision between the infinite cosmos and like the literal dirt on your shoes, that is our whole mission for today.
It's a really beautiful mission to tackle.
I think so too. We are doing a deep dive into this incredibly inspiring, deeply spiritual exploration of a book called Cuando la luz llama.
Which translates to When the Light Calls for our English listeners. Written by Claudia Renfro.
Right, by Claudia Renfro. And I really want to set the parameters for this conversation right out of the gate, because our mission today is to completely strip away all those heavy, suffocating layers of religious dogma.
Which is so necessary when approaching a text like this. You have to clear the board, so to speak.
You really do. Like, if you carry any baggage with the word religion, or if you've been burned by dogmatic institutions in the past, which, let's be honest, so many of us have.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly common.
Yeah, so I want you to just set that baggage down for the next hour or so. Just leave it to the door. Because the materials we are working with today, they present a version of spirituality that is just so pure and incredibly intimate.
Intimate is a great word for it, and also profoundly challenging.
Oh, for sure. Challenging in the best way possible.
Right, because it challenges the intellect just as much as it comforts the soul. And I think we should talk about the sources we have for this deep dive, because they are remarkably layered.
Yeah, we have a really unique mix of materials for this one.
We do. We aren't just looking at, a finished, polished text. We actually have exclusive excerpts from the book's manuscript itself.
Which is so cool to see the raw writing.
It is. And on top of that, we have some incredibly candid behind-the-scenes audio notes from the book's editorial team.
Yeah, specifically focusing on this editor named Pedro, who brings such a fascinating analytical lens to the whole thing.
He really does. And finally, we have this exclusive epilogue written by a figure named Manolo. And that epilogue, it grounds everything in this stunningly visceral, physical way.
Manolo's epilogue is just, I spent the whole weekend going through these sources, and I was just in a constant state of awe.
It's heavy material, but so elevating.
It really is. We are looking at a text that basically swings like a pendulum. Like on one side, you have these massive, sweeping, mystical visions.
And then on the other side, it swings right back down into the most grounded, almost gritty human reality.
Exactly. But before we get totally swept away by the poetry of it all, I think we need to figure out how we and how you, the listener, should actually use this information. Like, what is the practical application here?
Well, I would suggest treating this deep dive as a sort of map. A map for decoding your own internal architecture.
I love that. Decoding your internal architecture.
Right, because the goal of this text It isn't to convert you to a new belief system. It's not about making you join a club.
No, there's no dogma pushing you into a specific corner.
Exactly. It's really about helping you recognize the symbols that are actually already operating in your own subconscious. It is about awakening this entirely new level of consciousness.
Where you basically realize that the sacred isn't some external destination.
Right. It's not a place you have to, pack your bags and travel to. It's the reality you are already swimming in.
Even if you currently feel like you're completely drowning in it.
Which is how most of us feel on a Tuesday morning, right?
Oh, 100%. So let's start dismantling things then.
Yeah.
Because before we can really understand that infinite universe reflecting in a bucket of water, we have to fundamentally tear down and rebuild how we view the concept of the divine.
We have to do some serious demolition work on our preconceptions.
We really do. The text of Cuando la luz llama, it basically takes a sledgehammer to the traditional idea of a distant, punishing God.
It does not pull its punches on that front.
Not at all. You know the trope I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
The old man on a cloud holding a scorecard just waiting for you to mess up so he can smite you.
Right, the cosmic micromanager. The manuscript explicitly rejects that. It calls out what the author terms the god of fear, or the judge.
The judge, yeah.
And we really have to pause and consider how radical that is, historically speaking. Because for centuries, the entire architecture of global spirituality has mostly been built on this foundation of impending punishment.
Yeah, do this or burn, comply or else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The demand from these institutions has always been for absolute sterile perfection, which is, of course, impossible for humans.
Totally impossible. And it just breeds guilt.
But this text introduces us to a vastly different paradigm, and it does this through the figure of Rabuni.
Rabuni.
Yeah.
Which means my beloved teacher.
Yes. It's a deeply personal, historical way of referring to Yeshua, or Jesus.
But the characterization of him here is just so radically distinct from the dogmatic, institutionalized version we're used to seeing in stained glass windows.
It strips away all the empire-building stuff that got attached to his name later on.
Exactly. The text actually says, and I quote, "Not my judge, not my punishment, not the God of fear, but he whose gaze does not humiliate, but reveals."
Let's really unpack the psychology of that specific phrase, a gaze that does not humiliate.
It's such a specific choice of words. Humiliate.
Because dogmatic structures, they often use shame as their primary mechanism for control.
Oh, fear and shame are the twin engines of dogma, for sure.
Right. And the underlying message there is that if you actually look at the divine, the contrast between that perfection and your reality will just make you realize how flawed and dirty you are.
Like staring into a bright light that just highlights all your worst features.
Exactly, resulting in total humiliation. You're supposed to feel small and worthless in comparison.
But the Rabuni that's presented in this manuscript, he's the embodiment of unconditional love and approachability.
Completely approachable.
Yeah.
When you stand before this kind of presence, your ego's defenses just naturally dissolve.
Because there's nothing to defend against.
Exactly. There is no demand for you to be perfect. The text makes it clear that the only actual demand is for truth. Just raw, honest truth.
Wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. If we completely remove the concept of a judge,
Okay, yeah.
and we remove all the fear of punishment, aren't we just left with this sort of passive, anything goes spirituality? Like, where is the friction that causes a person to actually change and grow?
That is such a common fear, but that's actually the trap of our modern, cynical way of thinking.
How so?
Well, it's the assumption that fear is the only effective motivator for human growth. We assume that without the threat of a stick, nobody will ever move forward.
Right, because our society is so built on consequence and punishment.
But the text argues the exact opposite. It argues that love, in its purest, most unconditional form, is actually infinitely more demanding than fear.
Oh, that's interesting. Love is more demanding.
Because fear just forces compliance. It makes you hide your bad behavior. But love, real love, forces actual transformation.
That makes you want to be better, not just pretend to be better.
Exactly. And we see this played out in how the manuscript describes Rabuni's interactions with the world. Like, he didn't just tolerate the presence of children as some sort of exhausting obligation.
Right, he wasn't just putting up with them while the adults talked.
He actively sought them out, he celebrated them, he played with them.
And the reasoning the text gives for that is just fascinating to me. It says he gravitates toward children because they recognize truth and light before words.
Before words. That is key.
Yeah, they haven't yet built all that heavy intellectual armor that we adults drag around everywhere we go. You know, the cynicism, the debate tactics.
Children don't need a theological debate to recognize safety. They recognize love purely as a frequency, as an energy.
Just a pure vibe. And the author insists that this specific frequency, this divine presence, it isn't locked away inside a temple, and it's not restricted to the pages of a holy text.
No, it's encoded in the most ordinary, mundane human interactions.
She writes that it's found in a mother's tenderness. It's found in the literal physical act of sharing a piece of bread with someone.
It's in those unexpected hugs from a friend when you really need it.
Or even just that sudden, completely illogical wave of peace you sometimes feel right in the middle of a chaotic, stressful day.
Yes. The text argues that Jesus didn't just come to save humanity from some abstract external threat.
Right, he didn't come to act as a cosmic bouncer.
He came to remind humanity of its own inherent nature, to say, look, you already have this inside you.
See, this requires a massive rewiring of how I think about spiritual practice.
In what way?
Well, I just realized that I have this deep-seated cultural conditioning that tells me being spiritual means trying to, ascend.
Ah, the upward trajectory.
Yeah. I mean, look at our architecture. We build our cathedrals with these massive spires pointing straight up. We talk about reaching a higher consciousness.
It's all directional. Up is good, down is bad.
Exactly. The implication is always that human life, the bodies we live in, the methy emotions we have, that's the muddy bottom of a staircase.
Right, and God is at the pristine top of the stairs, keeping his shoes clean.
And our whole job is to just aggressively climb out of our messy humanity to reach those clean, pure heavens. But if the divine is literally embedded in the tearing of a piece of baked dough down here on earth...
In the stairs are a lie.
Right. Does that mean the entire concept of reaching up to heaven is completely backwards?
It means the spatial metaphor we've relied on for millennia is fundamentally flawed.
Completely upside down.
If you are constantly looking up, if you are desperately trying to escape the friction of your human life to find the divine,
You're missing the point.
yeah, you are literally abandoning the exact laboratory where your evolution is supposed to happen. The manuscript delivers this profoundly disruptive claim regarding this exact idea.
Oh, I know the line you're talking about.
It says, and this is crucial, the soul doesn't return to God. It wakes up.
The soul doesn't return to God. It wakes up. I mean, that fundamentally changes the physics of spirituality.
It really does.
Yeah.
Think about the linguistic implications of the word return.
Okay, yeah. Return implies a journey.
Right. It implies movement across a distance. It requires time, it requires effort, and it requires a change in your physical or spiritual location.
It basically assumes you are currently existing in a space where the divine is totally absent, and you have to go find it.
Exactly. But waking up requires zero travel.
You just open your eyes right where you are in bed.
It implies that you are already engulfed in the divine reality. You have always been there. You were simply unconscious of your surroundings.
That's so liberating.
In this framework, love isn't just some soft, passive emotion. It is a highly active, perceptive power.
It's like the sensory mechanism that actually allows you to open your eyes and realize the divine is the very oxygen in the room.
Beautifully put, yes.
So, okay, if the soul wakes up internally, rather than, packing its bags and traveling externally across the cosmos,
Yeah.
where is this awakening actually taking place?
Geographically speaking, within the body.
Right, because the sources point us directly to the human heart. And what blew my mind is that they're not just talking about the heart as a poetic metaphor for where our feelings live, like on a Valentine's Day card.
No, they're discussing it as a literal, biological, and spiritual nexus point.
Let's dive into that chapter from the manuscript. It's titled El Corazón como Templo, so the heart as a temple.
The text takes the physical organ, the actual muscle pumping blood through your veins, and it elevates it to an altar.
It describes the heart as a womb of light, which is such a striking image.
A space that is actively gestating a new, elevated state of human consciousness. It's an active process.
To really grasp the mechanics of this, I think we need to bring in that behind-the-scenes editorial audio we have.
Oh, the tapes with Pedro, yes.
Yeah, we get to hear Pedro, the editor, in this really deep analytical conversation with the author, Claudia. And Pedro is just absolutely captivated by one specific line in her writing.
The line is, "The heart is the living book where God writes every day."
Right. And Pedro takes that line, which, on the surface just sounds like beautiful, mystical poetry, and he rigorously applies it to actual human biology.
He makes this profound philosophical argument about the nature of time and existence based on cardiac function.
Which sounds crazy, but it works so well.
He argues that our true existence, the absolute core of our being, It doesn't actually reside in the continuous deafening noise of the outside world.
Or even in the continuous stressful flow of our own internal thoughts.
Exactly. He pinpoints our spiritual existence to the microscopic silent void between two heartbeats.
Okay, I really want to explore the biology of that for a second because it's fascinating.
Let's do it.
If you look at an electrocardiogram, a heart monitor, you have the electrical spike that causes the heart muscle to violently contract, which pushes the blood out.
Systole, right?
Right, systole. But then, crucially, the muscle has to relax.
Yeah.
It has to completely pause in order to fill with blood again before the next contraction.
The diastole. Yes, that tiny fraction of a second, that biological resting phase.
Pedro refers to it in the audio as isa nada.
That nothingness, that empty void.
He argues that this void is not just a biological necessity for pumping blood, but a literal spiritual gateway.
That fraction of a second of absolute silence is the blank page where the living book is actually written.
Okay, let's test that theory against something really relatable for the listener.
I love a good analogy.
Think about a complex piece of music, say a jazz composition or a huge classical symphony.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
If a composer just throws a continuous unbroken wall of sound at you, just notes playing incessantly with absolutely no breaks, your brain just registers it as chaotic noise.
It's overwhelming. It's just a wall of frequency.
Exactly. What actually gives the music its rhythm, its emotional gravity, and its ultimate meaning?
It's the rests.
Yes, it's the deliberate silences placed between the notes. The silence is what gives the sound its architecture.
The space defines the structure. That's an incredibly useful way to look at it.
It really helped it click for me.
Now, apply that architecture to the modern human experience.
Oh boy.
We are entirely conditioned to live in a continuous, unbroken wall of noise.
From the second we wake up.
We have the endless scroll of information on our phones, the push notifications, the economic anxieties, the geopolitical crises playing on the news.
We are just completely drowning in sound and data.
And because of that conditioning, we naturally assume that spiritual illumination, if it even exists, it must be a sound that is somehow louder than all of that other noise.
We expect a burning bush. We expect a booming voice from the heavens.
Something that violently interrupts our lives and forces us to pay attention.
We want the universe to shout at us so we don't actually have to do the hard work of getting quiet ourselves.
That is exactly it. But the text is telling us that true illumination operates on an entirely different frequency altogether.
It is found by tuning into that biological pause.
It is the conscious recognition of that tiny, sustained silence occurring in your chest 60 to 100 times a minute.
The divine isn't trying to outshout your anxieties.
No, the divine is the silence between the beats. The mind translates the world, sure, but the heart acts as the primary antenna.
The truth is born first in that empty pulse that sustains our physical life.
It takes a whole concept of mindfulness, which, let's be honest, can sometimes feel frustratingly abstract.
Oh, totally. Clear your mind. What does that even mean?
Right. But this gives it a visceral physical location. You don't have to try and visualize some glowing orb of light in your mind to meditate. You just have to locate the physical pause inside your own ribcage.
It's so grounding. But this leads to a really fascinating problem in the text.
Which is?
Well, when you actually manage to get quiet and you tune into that silence between the heartbeats, the soul begins to communicate, right?
Yes, the channel opens.
But according to this deep dive, it doesn't speak in straightforward prose. It doesn't, hand you an instruction manual written in plain English or Spanish.
No, it speaks exclusively in symbols.
Yes, symbols. And Cuando la llama is essentially a masterclass in learning this symbolic language.
Symbols are the native language of the subconscious and the soul, and this text is just saturated with them.
Everywhere you look.
We encounter the eagle, representing ascending vision. We see the mirror, which is the ultimate symbol of the soul reflecting upon its own true nature.
We are introduced to the llama del equilibrio, the flame of equilibrium.
And one of the most structurally important geometric symbols in the entire manuscript is the intersection of two circles.
Forming the shape historically known as the vesica Piscis, or what the author simply refers to as the almond. I really want to dig into the vesica Piscis because you see this shape everywhere once you know what to look for.
It's ubiquitous in ancient art.
It's in sacred architecture. It's in medieval paintings. For those who can't picture it, you basically draw two circles of the exact same radius, and you overlap them, so the center of each circle lies exactly on the perimeter of the other.
And that overlapping area right in the middle creates that pointed oval, the almond shape.
Right. Why is this specific geometry so central to the book's entire message?
Because it is the absolute ultimate mathematical and visual representation of reconciling opposites.
Bringing two opposing sides together.
Yes, it is the shared space between two completely distinct worlds. In the context of the manuscript, the author receives a vision called the Oracle of the Parchment.
Which is a heavy chapter.
Very heavy.
Right.
And the Oracle delivers a message that completely subverts our traditional understanding of the human condition. It states that flesh and spirit were separated deliberately.
Deliberately. Which goes against almost every major theological narrative we've ever been taught.
It flips the script entirely.
Because we're typically taught that our physical, flawed human nature is the result of a catastrophic mistake, right? Like a fall from grace. Eve eating the apple.
A cosmic error that ruined everything.
Yeah. We are told that being in a physical body, dealing with biological urges and shadowy psychological traits, is basically a punishment that we have to overcome.
A prison sentence.
Exactly. But the Oracle is saying, no, this was the design all along.
The exact quote is, "Thrown into division to learn to unite."
Thrown into division to learn to unite.
The human soul had to dive headfirst into the density of the physical world, into the shadow, essentially to actually comprehend and value the light.
It's the contrast principle.
Exactly. If you exist only in unbroken, blinding light, you have absolutely no context for it. You can't see form. You need the contrast.
The shadow isn't some demonic enemy trying to destroy you. It is the necessary canvas for the light.
This requires a massive recalibration of how we deal with duality in our daily lives.
Because we are so socially and culturally programmed to view the world as an endless battlefield,
Everything is a war.
it's always good versus evil, light versus dark, the purity of spirit versus the corruption of the flesh.
And living with that battlefield mentality internally is just exhausting.
It burns people out.
The book offers a completely different framework. It uses the symbols of the sun and the moon and the eagle and the serpent, and it asks you to view these opposing forces not as combatants locked in a death match, but as eternal lovers engaged in a really complex dance.
In the editorial audio we have, Pedro points to a very specific cultural symbol to illustrate this, which I thought was brilliant. He talks about the eagle and the serpent on the Mexican flag.
Yes, that is a fantastic example.
Because normally you look at that flag and you think, oh, the eagle is destroying the serpent. Good is conquering evil.
That's the superficial read, yeah.
But Pedro argues that this imagery shouldn't be interpreted as a bloody, triumphant struggle. From a deeper symbolic perspective, it actually represents the soaring spirit, the eagle, successfully integrating the grounded, earthly shadow of the serpent.
It's about transforming that venomous shadow into vital, usable strength.
It changes the entire narrative from one of conquest to one of sacred integration.
And the text also brings in a fascinating historical echo to show that this process of integration, it isn't some new age invention.
Right. It mentions Mary Hall.
Yes, portraying her as a woman who served as a literal bridge between dimensions, holding that tension of opposites, and who was heavily persecuted for it.
The inclusion of Mary Hall is such a vital grounding point in the text.
It grounds the mystical in harsh historical reality.
Exactly. Because historically, individuals who operate in that overlapping space of the Vesicapisci species, people who actually bridge the gap between the material and the mystical, the light and the shadow, they are almost always viewed as incredibly dangerous by dogmatic institutions.
Because institutions rely on clear, rigid divisions.
They need the us versus them battlefield mentality to maintain their power.
A bridge threatens that control. If there's a bridge, the walls don't matter anymore.
It's so true. The persecution of figures like Mary Hall highlights that the soul's evolution, this whole process of dancing with the shadow, it is not a smooth, uninterrupted upward trajectory.
No, it is fraught with misunderstanding, and it operates cyclically.
The text actually implies that souls return to finish missions, sort of picking up the work of integration where they left off in previous cycles.
Which is a beautiful way of looking at generational trauma and healing.
Now, while we are on the topic of specific cultural touchstones, the editorial audio revealed a really fascinating tension regarding the book's universalism.
This was such a great editorial catch.
Claudia's original visions strongly identify Mexico as a critical seed for this new humanity, a sort of geographical altar of awakening.
But Pedro steps in with some really crucial piece of editorial advice.
He does, and it shows immense editorial wisdom on his part.
Because Pedro recognizes the inherent danger of spiritual nationalism.
Right. We've seen how that plays out in history, and it's never good.
Never. So he advises the author that while the specific energetic epicenter might be subjectively felt in Mexico for her, the awakening of the soul and the reconciliation of light and shadow is an inherently global phenomenon.
It belongs to the entire human race.
He insists the message must remain completely inclusive, actively avoiding any trap that would make one group of people feel spiritually superior or more chosen than another.
That level of care is so important. It prevents a pure spiritual insight from being hijacked by human tribalism.
It keeps the ego out of the revelation.
But, all this rich discussion about shadows and light and eagles and serpents, I really want to bring this down to earth for the listener right now,
Let's do it. Practical application.
because we are so deeply, deeply conditioned to go to war with our own dark sides.
We treat ourselves like the enemy.
We do. We go to therapy with the explicit goal of fixing our flaws. We make aggressive New Year's resolutions to completely destroy our bad habits.
It's very violent language we use against ourselves.
Very. So if the shadow is actually supposed to be the canvas for the light, as the text says, how does a person practically stop fighting their darkness and actually start partnering with it?
That transition right there, that is the defining characteristic of actual spiritual maturity.
Okay, so how do we do it?
Well, think about the mechanics of a literal war. If you view your shadow, so your insecurities, your past traumas, your capacity for anger or jealousy, if you view those as enemy combatants, you actually empower them.
You give them something to push back
You
against?
give them substance. And you spend massive, exhausting amounts of psychological energy just trying to keep them locked in the basement of your subconscious.
It's holding the door shut all day.
Exactly. But if you shift your perspective and you view those traits as the canvas, the entire dynamic changes.
Because you can't fight a canvas.
Right. You cannot paint a masterpiece of light on a perfectly white canvas. The light would be completely invisible. You require the dark background to give the light any definition and depth.
So, practically speaking, what is the action the listener should take?
The action is observation without judgment.
Observation without judgment.
It means looking at your own flaws without that gaze of humiliation we discussed earlier.
Looking at yourself the way Rabuni looks at you.
Exactly. It means looking at your own internal shadow with the exact same unconditional tenderness that Rabuni demonstrates. When you stop actively fighting the shadow, you instantly reclaim all the energy you were wasting on that internal war.
Oh, wow. And then you have all this free energy to actually do something with.
Precisely. You can then channel that reclaimed energy into creating the Lama del Equilibrio, the flame of equilibrium.
Yeah.
You hold the tension of both opposites until they naturally create a new, balanced state.
Holding the tension. I love that. And that brings us to what I think is the absolute masterpiece of this entire deep dive.
The epilogue.
Yes. Because up until now, we've been dealing with massive cosmic architecture, right?
Yeah.
The language of the soul, the multiverse, the integration of spirit and flesh.
Very heavy, abstract concepts.
But the book concludes with this epilogue written by Manolo. And he takes every single one of these massive floating truths and brings them crashing down into a sensory reality that you can almost literally smell and taste.
Manolo's epilogue is just a masterclass in grounding the mystical experience. He paints an incredibly vivid scene.
Set the scene for us.
He describes walking arm in arm with his beloved Rabuni Yeshua. But notice the specific setting he chooses. They are not floating on ethereal, glowing clouds.
They aren't strolling through some manicured, pristine garden of enlightenment.
No, they're walking straight through the noisy, chaotic heart of ancient Jerusalem.
And he doesn't romanticize the setting at all, which I appreciate. He describes the streets as old and foul-smelling.
Very gritty.
You can vividly picture the chaos. There are merchants screaming out their prices. You have money changers haggling aggressively over coins. There's the suffocating dust kicked up by the livestock everywhere.
It's loud, it's abrasive, it probably smells like sweat and commerce.
It is the absolute epitome of the daily, gritty human grind.
And it is right in the epicenter of this sensory overload that Rabuni stops him. He places a firm hand on Manolo's shoulder and just halts him right in the middle of the crowded street.
They find themselves standing in front of this massive dyer's vat, what the text calls a tinaja.
Yes, an enormous clay pot.
And this pot is filled to the brim with water that has been used to dye fabric a deep, intense purple. The manuscript specifically names it argaman.
I think we really need to spend a minute understanding what argaman actually is, because the historical context adds a completely new layer of meaning to this scene.
It really does. Argaman was the ancient, incredibly valuable Tyrian purple dye.
It was arguably the most expensive substance in the entire ancient world, often worth way more than its weight in gold.
which is why it became strictly associated with royalty, emperors, and high priests. Only the elite could afford it.
But the process of actually making it was horrific.
So horrific. To get that beautiful royal purple color, laborers had to harvest tens of thousands of these predatory sea snails, murex snails, for the Mediterranean Sea.
Tens of thousands, just for a tiny bit of dye.
Right. They had to crack them open, extract this tiny little gland, and then let thousands of these glands rot in massive vats under the hot sun for days on end.
And the smell was famously putrid.
Unbelievably bad. Pliny the Elder actually wrote about how terrible the dye factories smelled.
So you have this incredible paradox set up here.
Right. The most elevated, sacred, royal color in the known world is produced through this incredibly violent, foul-smelling, labor-intensive rotting process.
That paradox is exactly why this scene is so structurally brilliant. Rabuni doesn't take Manolo to the peak of a silent, snowy mountain to explain the secrets of the cosmos.
Like every other guru trope.
Right. For millennia, spiritual seekers have believed they had to flee human commerce and filth to find revelation. They seek out silent caves and pristine forests to escape the dirt.
But here, the ultimate revelation of the universe's architecture happens in a noisy, smelly, working-class marketplace, looking into a pot of used, pungent dye water.
It's a complete, utter rejection of the idea that the sacred requires a sterile environment.
It tells the listener that the divine is inextricably tangled up in the mess of human experience.
You don't have to wait until your life is perfectly quiet and clean to find it.
Exactly. You don't have to wait until your finances are in order and your relationships are completely stress-free to access the sacred.
Because if you wait for that, you'll be waiting forever.
The sacred is right in front of you, reflecting in the dirty puddles of your daily life, even when you are totally overwhelmed by the metaphorical merchants and money changers in your own mind.
Your anxieties, your deadlines.
You're doom scrolling at 2 in the morning. God is standing with you right in the middle of the marketplace.
God is standing with you in the marketplace. That is the core takeaway of the whole epilogue.
So good. So they are standing before this immense vat of dark purple water, and Rabuni points down into it, and he delivers a metaphor that completely collapses the boundaries between the microscopic and the cosmic.
He tells Manolo to just look closely at the reflections on the surface of the water.
Because the water was just used to rinse heavy fabric, right? So it's highly agitated. There are ripples and little waves bouncing off the sides of the clay pot.
And the bright Mediterranean sun is hitting that moving water, creating hundreds of dazzling, chaotic flashes of light.
It's so intense it almost blinds Manolo.
And as Manolo is squinting at this bright, chaotic movement in the pot, Rabuni says, and this is a profound quote, "Just as this jug contains water, colors, lights, and movement, the Father's kingdom contains universes like the jugs, suns like the flashes of light, and worlds, and inside them, thousands of stories of endless humanities."
He goes on to say, towards one side, towards the other, upwards or downwards, inwards and outwards. The house of 1,000 mansions of the Father is infinite.
A house of 1,000 mansions. It is ancient mystical poetry describing what a modern quantum physicist would casually refer to as the multiverse.
It really is the multiverse. Rabuni is taking the human perspective and violently scaling it to infinity.
He is suggesting that an entire universe, complete with its billions of galaxies and eons of deep time, is conceptually identical to a single, fragile clay jug filled with water.
And the terrifying, beautiful truth is that there are infinite jugs.
Infinite jugs.
This is where we have to talk about fractals, because the geometry of this metaphor is mathematically flawless.
Explain fractals for the listener, just to be clear.
Sure. A fractal is a complex pattern where every single part, no matter how much you zoom in or zoom out, has the exact same statistical character as the whole.
Like a fern leaf, where each little leaf looks like a miniature version of the whole fern.
Exactly. What Rabuni is doing here is showing Manolo the ultimate cosmic fractal.
The ultimate zoom out.
He's saying that staring down into the chaotic, microscopic reality of a single drop of agitated, smelly dye water is structurally indistinguishable from looking out through the James Webb Space Telescope at the sprawling web of dark matter at the edge of the known universe.
The macro and the micro are just reflections of each other. As above, so below.
And grasping that fractal nature, it induces a very specific, often jarring state of consciousness.
It creates an overwhelming sense of insignificance, for sure.
Yeah, but it pairs it with a feeling of profound, unbreakable connection. Manolo actually describes his mind physically expanding at this realization.
He says he reached a point where he could no longer assign a defined size, an exact dimension, or a limit to anything in existence.
Now, I can imagine a listener feeling a real sense of existential dread at this concept.
Oh, absolutely. The cosmic dread is real.
To realize that the infinite is contained in a bucket, to realize there are endless universes, it could make you feel like your life, your pain, your joys are absolutely meaningless.
Like you are less than a speck of dust.
Right. How does the text protect the reader from falling into that trap of nihilism?
It protects the reader through the context of who is delivering the message.
Rabuni.
Exactly. If you were viewing this infinite fractal universe through the lens of the god of fear or the punishing judge we dismantled earlier, then yes, being infinitely small is a terrifying proposition.
It means you are completely insignificant and vulnerable in a cold, hierarchical system.
But remember, this vision is being guided by Rabuni, the embodiment of tender, unconditional love. When you view your own infinite smallness through the lens of absolute love, insignificance transforms into deep comfort.
Okay, wait. How does insignificance become a comfort?
Because it means you are not carrying the weight of the cosmos on your shoulders.
Oh, man.
You don't have to hold the universe together. You are just one tiny, beautiful flash of light reflecting on the agitated water for a fraction of a second.
You're allowed to just be the flash of light.
Exactly. But simultaneously, because the universe is a fractal, you contain multitudes.
The infinite reality is swirling outside of you, but the exact same infinite architecture is swirling inside the silence between your heartbeats.
You are nothing, and you are everything, all at once.
And that shattering realization, it leads Manolo to the final, liberating conclusion of his entire epilogue.
The big takeaway.
Because he realizes that nothing has a defined size or an exact boundary, he comes to understand what he calls the first law of the universe.
He states, Nada está estático, todo está en movimiento.
Nothing is static. Everything is in motion.
This is the point where theoretical physics and deep, practical psychological healing completely overlap.
I love when science and spirituality shake hands like this.
Right. From a purely scientific standpoint, at the quantum level, everything is vibrating.
Constant motion.
Even the seemingly solid chair you are sitting on right now is composed of atomic structures that are in a constant state of energetic motion.
The universe is physically expanding as we speak.
Absolute stillness simply does not exist in the physical world.
So if we take that fundamental physical law of the cosmos, that nothing is static, and we apply it to our messy, emotional, human lives, what does that actually look like in practice?
It serves as the ultimate scientific antidote to human despair.
That is a bold claim.
Think about the darkest psychological moments a person can experience. When you are deep in the trenches of grief or battling severe depression, or when you feel entirely paralyzed by a traumatic event. What is the dominant defining sensation?
The sensation is that you are stuck.
Stuck. You feel like the pain is a permanent, static reality and that your life has become a frozen landscape.
Yes. You feel like the narrative of your life has just hit a brick wall, the story has stopped progressing, and this agonizing state is just how it is going to be forever.
Precisely. But if the absolute first law of the infinite universe is that nothing is static and everything is in motion, then your psychological stagnation is an illusion.
It's literally a cosmic impossibility for you to be permanently stuck in your trauma, your shadow, or your grief.
The physical universe is moving, the energetic universe is moving, and therefore your soul is moving.
You are healing, you are evolving, and you are shifting states, even if that movement is happening so slowly and microscopically that you can't consciously perceive it in the moment.
It's like the movement of a tectonic plate. You can't see it happening, but it is fundamentally reshaping the entire world.
This connects so perfectly back to a metaphor Claudia uses earlier in the book. She writes about the Niña, an inner child that lives inside every heart, representing the birth of this new, awakened humanity.
Yes, the inner child.
And the thing about a child is that you have a responsibility to nurture it. But nurturing doesn't mean wrapping the child in bubble wrap and locking it in a safe, static room so it never gets hurt.
Nurturing requires risk.
True nurturing means allowing it the freedom to move, to fall down, to scrape its knees, and to eventually evolve into an adult.
Exactly. You cannot protect your soul or your inner child by trying to freeze time or avoid the friction of life. You protect it by participating in its movement.
The universe demands evolution.
The water in the dyer's vat has to keep rippling and churning so the flashes of sunlight can keep reflecting. If the water freezes, the vision stops.
Man, what an incredible architecture to build a deep dive around. We've covered a massive amount of philosophical and emotional terrain today.
We truly have. We started by dismantling the heavy, oppressive architecture of the punishing judge, making room to discover the intimate, unconditional tenderness of Rabuni.
A presence so grounded it can be found in the tearing of a piece of bread.
We moved from external dogma to internal biology, realizing that the divine isn't shouting at us from a cloud, but is quietly residing in the silent void between our own heartbeats.
We explored the messy geometry of the human soul, looking at the vesica Pisces, and learning that we don't have to go to war with our shadow.
The shadow isn't a demon to be slain, it's the rich, dark canvas that makes our light visible.
And we followed Manolo out of the abstract heavens and into the loud, foul-smelling streets of ancient Jerusalem.
We stood with him in front of a vat of purple dye and realized that the universe is a fractal house of 1,000 mansions.
We learned that whether we're looking at a galaxy or a drop of water, we're looking at the exact same infinite reality, governed by the reassuring law that absolutely everything is in beautiful, continuous motion.
It is profound, but it leaves you feeling remarkably light.
To you, listening right now, wherever you are, I truly hope this conversation has sparked an immense, undeniable curiosity to go find and read Cuando la Luz Llama.
It is absolutely a text that has the gravitational pull to fundamentally alter how you experience your own life.
It really is. And I want to leave you with a challenge for today. When you are moving through your normal, noisy, stressful routine, take just 5 seconds to look closely at your mundane surroundings.
Just observe it.
Look at the oil slick in a puddle on the pavement. Look at the swirling surface of your coffee in your mug. Look at the chaotic, moving crowd on a busy street. And just remember, for that 1 second, that you are not looking at the mundane. You are looking directly at the infinite.
The sacred is right there, reflecting back at you in the marketplace.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a brand new question to chew on. Something that builds on this idea of constant cosmic motion. We spend so much of our human life desperately seeking closure.
Oh, we are obsessed with closure.
We want to perfectly tie up the loose ends of our failed relationships, our lingering grief, our past mistakes, so we can just put them in a neat little box and be done with them.
We want the story to end cleanly.
But if the absolute first law of the universe is that nothing is ever static and everything is always in motion, what does that mean for our obsession with closure?
That's a great question.
If the infinite universe never actually finishes its own story, if it is always churning and evolving into the next shape, maybe we don't have to perfectly finish our stories either. Maybe it's okay to just leave the door open.